It means put to death the deeds of the flesh, to mortify the old man, to crucify the old man and all of his deeds, and be born afresh and anew. In other words, when we are prepared for this perfect land in the presence of the Lord Jesus Christ, it will be only after we have crucified and put to death the old man and we are made new creatures in the Lord Jesus Christ, fit for heaven. But yet, there's something strange in a world of today seeking for a paradise, seeking for, how many of you have heard of El Dorado? El Dorado was a mythical city of gold. And by the way, there were people in other days who genuinely believed in El Dorado. The man who first explored, I'm talking about the first white European, that explored the Amazon River was in search of El Dorado. The conquistadors, and I heard one fellow say the conquistadors. The conquistadors came to this continent. They explored the American West in search of El Dorado. And Edgar Allan Poe wrote a poem, Gale of Delight, a gallant knight, in sunshine and in shadow, had journeyed long, singing a song in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and over his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him, at length, he met a pilgrim's shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, ride, boldly ride. The shade replies, if you seek for El Dorado. Do you understand the meaning? How futile a life lived, searching for that city of gold on this earth. And how disappointed at its end you will be when a shadow has to tell you something with no substance, has to inform you that it does not exist on this earth, this El Dorado, this paradise that can never be, this world that can never be established by sinful men. And so, heaven is a place that God creates. And then He prepares us for it. Can I tell you something? Men were not created to live. I was not created to live in this kind of world. What? No, I was not. And neither were you. Adam and Eve were not equipped emotionally or mentally to live in this kind of world. Why do we die? Because we were not made for this world. Well, what world were we made for, preacher? When God created Adam and Eve, He put them in a garden. It was a perfect garden. It was a place where the bitter cold did not force the collar up against the bitterness of the wind. It was a place where the heat did not force you into a shade. It was a place where there was not a gnawing in the pit of your stomach and the worry in your heart of where your next plate of sustenance would come. And so they were created and they were put in a beautiful garden. Oh, what a beautiful place Mom and Dad lived. I'm talking about Daddy Adam and Mama Eve. You know, they were my grandmas and grandpa. Grandma Eve and Grandpa Adam. They lived in a beautiful place. There were rivers that were flowing, trees that were blooming year-round and bearing fruit every season of the year. And there was nothing to harm. The lion would not attack. The bear was harmless as a lamb. And all of those things had no fear of man upon them whatsoever. No. And if you decided to till the soil, there were no briars to rise up against you. There were no grasses. There were no jab grass or nut grasses that we used to be plagued with on the nurseries. There were none of those things to hinder your crop. Nature did not raise up against you in the form of volcanoes and earthquakes and floods. Those things simply did not exist. And you could sleep out every night. And you didn't have to worry about frostbite. For all of those things were non-existent in the world and wrote a book titled Paradise Lost in the 17th century. I forget his name just now. Does anyone remember?
C.S. Lewis?
Huh?
No, it wasn't C.S. Lewis.
Yes. Paradise Lost, referring to the loss of the Garden of Eden.
John Milton. Huh? John Milton.
That's it. That's him. That was him. That was him. And he wrote about the paradise that used to be and that we had lost it so completely. And I want to tell you why we lost that heaven on earth. Because of sin. Because we yielded, and I say we, because I'm kin to Adam, I'm kin to Eve. They were my ancestors, and they passed their traits on to me. And I was born a sinner because I inherited that trait from Adam. Because when they were tempted, you see, God only said, there's only one thing that is not permitted unto you. One thing. He gave them a choice. Do you want to live in this garden or do you not? And so they had the choice. So God said, thou shalt not eat of the tree of the forbidden fruit. And what is it that they did? Kind of reminded me of, now if I hadn't said anything, it probably wouldn't have happened. But one day I was out cutting my grass in the yard, and Johnny was just a little thing. He was over at the house yesterday. He weighs over 300 pounds. Stronger than a bull. I mean, you can't do anything with him. He is all muscle. I don't know if you've ever seen him or not, but he is pure, one great big muscle. Strong as a bull. But there was a time when he was just a little boy. And I was pushing my lawnmower along there, and he was walking along, and he had his hands on the bar, you know, the middle bar that crosses there in the handle of the lawnmower. And he was walking along pushing the mower with me, pretending that he was cutting the grass. And in those days, I ran out of gas. So I said to him as I walked around, as I was on my way around to the front porch, the carport, to get the can of gas, I said, Johnny, don't touch that thing right there because it is hot and it will burn you. And about the time I got around to the carport, I heard him scream. And what did he do? The one thing I told him not to do is the thing he did. And his poor little hand was just burnt. You could see the perfect imprint of the muffler in the palm of his hand. And he was screaming to the high heaven. God only said, don't do one thing, and that's what we did. And because we chose to disobey God, we lost our paradise. We lost our heaven on earth. And so God had provided for us a new opportunity, a new chance. Now, it is not a paradise to be lost, but it is a paradise to be regained. You see, Adam and Eve was created to never die. Did you know that? Death came by sin, and sin came by disobedience to God. Some folks say there's no such thing as sin. Some say that sin is nothing more than too much appetite and not enough digestion. Some say sin is nothing but the backward pull of outworn good. Some say that sin is nothing more than a forward stumble in the evolution of man. Meaning that that which is today considered to be sinful will someday considered to be good. And also meaning that what used to be good is now considered evil. But I want to say to you today that sin is rebellion against the will of God for your life. And as long as we are in rebellion against God, we will be in rebellion against one another. And as long as we are in rebellion against God and one another, we will never have peace in our soul, no matter what kind of luxury and joy and pleasure we experience in this life. There was a man who once had, I guess, may I tell you about him? He was a millionaire. And I need you to help me preach this sermon. He developed aircraft during World War II. Now, it wasn't John D. Rockefeller. What was his name?
Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes. And in the 70s, he disappeared and nobody knew where Howard Hughes was. He didn't want anybody to approach him. You know, he built the Spruce Goose. Y'all remember that? Huge, huge aircraft. Maybe it was still the largest in the world, but it was made out of wood. Called it the Spruce Goose. It only flew for maybe a quarter of a mile, half a mile or so in the San Francisco Bay. And but he consented to an interview. And the only way he would allow himself to be interviewed was for him to be in one of his many aircraft high above the earth, somewhere above the earth, and not knowing where, they interviewed him. And the question was asked, and I remembered this. And they asked him, they said, "Howard, are you happy?" Now here's this man with all of this wealth. And this is what he said. Or something similar to it. I'm not trying to quote him. But he said, "How can I be happy with the things that are going on in our day and time? And people are acting the way they are acting. How can I be happy with so much deception and lies being told?" And I thought about that. Now here is a man with all the wealth that you could possibly ever spend in a lifetime, and he was not happy. And Solomon was a man who had treasures more so than any king before him or afterwards. In fact, he was the richest man in the world. And when the Queen of Sheba came to observe his lifestyle, she